So in the news last week, we learned that a sexual assault trial in Calgary got canceled because they didn't have enough people available to staff the court. And I want to tell you what that has to do with Danielle Smith and her fall referendum. So, you're likely aware we've got this referendum coming up in the fall where Danielle Smith and the UCP are forcing us to vote on whether our province, Alberta, stays as part of Canada. What you might not know is that there's 9 other questions on that ballot, and they're all about giving Danielle Smith and the UCP more power and more control. More control over who gets to come to Alberta as an immigrant. More control over how they get treated when they get here, whether they can access health care, whether their kids can go to school. And more control over who gets appointed as a judge in our federal courts. Now, these 9 questions are all written to ask you if you agree that the government of Alberta should get more power and control. But the fact is, those questions are all written by Danielle Smith. And they're based on recommendations from the Alberta Next Roadshow, which happened last summer, and that was chaired by Danielle Smith. And the folks at those panels were only allowed to talk about the handful of issues that have been chosen and approved by Danielle Smith. So it's a rigged game from the top to the bottom. And these questions on the referendum, they've all been set up by Danielle Smith. They're all part of this coordinated effort by Danielle Smith and the UCP to try to get your blessing to give more power to Danielle Smith. And for me, if someone is asking for more power, well, hey, I want to take a look at what they're doing with the power they've already got. Which brings me to that sexual assault trial that got canceled in Calgary last week. You see, our provincial courts, every aspect of them, from the buildings, the judges, to the clerks, the security that staff the courtrooms, that's all the responsibility of the provincial government. That means Danielle Smith and the UCP are responsible for funding them. And for years, judges, lawyers, others have all been speaking out and saying that if the provincial government didn't step up and start funding our courts properly, we'd see cases getting dropped because they took too long to get to trial. And that means then that victims of serious crimes like sexual assault, well, they don't get their day in court or their chance at justice. And it potentially means that people who may have committed serious violent crimes could walk free. And frankly, that's what happened last week. Now, of course, I can't say whether the accused in that case was guilty. That's what the trial would have decided. But what we do know is that after someone made the effort to come forward and say they'd been sexually assaulted, and after police interviewed them, investigated, and decided that they had enough grounds to press charges, and then prosecutors, they reviewed that evidence and they agreed and pushed to go to trial. After all that work, all that effort, any chance of justice got thrown out the window because on the day of the trial, there weren't enough resources available to run the court. In the words of the judge themselves, quote, "The resources of the Alberta Court of Justice are balanced on the blade of a very thin knife." And that's because Danielle Smith and the UCP are refusing to provide enough funding to properly staff and resource our provincial courts. And because of that, both the accuser and the accused in a case of sexual assault were denied their day in court. So it seems to me that before we even consider granting this government even more power over another level of our court system, maybe they should actually step up and do their job with the power and responsibility they've already got. Not to mention the fact that the over $100 million of taxpayer money that the UCP are going to be spending to run their vanity referendum, well, that would probably be better spent on things like, well, hey, making sure we can actually afford to operate our courts. And that's why, just like on Danielle Smith's question on leaving Canada, on these other 9 questions on giving her more power and control, I'm going to be voting no. And I hope you do too. Because the fact is, they were given the power they have to serve the people, not themselves. And they're failing on that. And you deserve a government that puts your priorities, not its own power, first.